Good afternoon, everybody. I am Vince D'Addario. I am the football analyst here at IrishBreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is that guy. He is Brian Driscoll. He's a publisher at IrishBreakdown.com. And thank goodness, frankly, that he's feeling better because we all had a void in our lives yesterday, and that includes me. But we're back. We're better than ever, and we're ready to do this. Heck of a game last night, and that is kind of what prompts the topic for today, Brian. We are going
Heck
to
of a finish to the game last
Well-
night. I thought it was pretty boring for the first 3.5 quarters, to be completely honest with you.
That's fair, and that was a sentiment shared by many, including my partner in crime from the bowl game. He posted boring first quarter, but I thought it was some really, really good defense. We were watching two elite defenses play for the most part.
One elite defense. I don't
Okay.
think Alabama has an elite defense, just because I don't think Georgia has an elite offense.
They do not have an elite offense.
I think
by
they have
any
a good
stretch of the
offense, and
imagination.
honestly, I thought that the big thing for me from last night's game is I thought Georgia outcoached Alabama, and that's the part that surprised me.
That surprised the heck out of me.
most. And honestly, it's kind of. What you and I talked this offseason that we thought Bama was going to take a step back. And one of the reasons is that I'm not high on Bill O'Brien. And everybody said, oh, he lost his top two receivers. And if they don't get hurt, they win the game. Yeah, probably. But again, that's because you relied on just being better. What made Alabama so good in recent seasons is offensively, yes, they had great players, but they were coached really well. Bill O'Brien has not done a great coaching job this year. I feel, and I've said this many, many times. Did you lose something, Vince?
I did. I lost my pen.
Okay.
I was going to start writing some stuff down, and I'm like lost. Can't find anything. Anyway, go ahead.
Sorry about that. I'm just
Sorry.
I'm like, what is he doing? Is he bobbing and weaving? Is there like a fly coming at him or something? What is going on? But I just felt like all season, really, Alabama just got by on having better players than everybody they played.
Sound familiar?
It's why they barely beat LSU. It's why they barely beat Alabama. Auburn. It's why they barely beat Florida, because they weren't a really well-coached team this year offensively. They were just better.
They were just better. They have a better roster.
Right.
Almost every team in the country.
No attempt to try to run the football, hardly at all.
Yeah,
and then when you drop back and throw, they're throwing down the field the whole game. It's like you tried to do the same game plan you did in the SEC title game.
Oh, absolutely.
It's like same philosophy, and it worked early when you had Jamison Williams, because he's just better than anybody Georgia has. Because the one thing you and I have said, and it was proven true in the SEC title game, is Georgia's secondary is overrated. It's not great in coverage.
We were talking about the potential matchup between Notre Dame and Georgia.
I think Notre Dame could have thrown the ball on Georgia.
That was an area.
The problem is once Jamison Williams went out, then he started asking these young guys to do exactly what they had done before. There was no alteration of the game plan. And then they come out in the third quarter and they're quickly getting rid of the ball, right? And they're finally going to the quick game and they're getting it out to the backs. And all of a sudden, guess what? Bam, 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 right up and down the field. And then they get in the red zone, and it looked like a Brian Kelly offense, like pass.
Yeah.
And it's like you're playing into Georgia's hands at that point in time. And if their red zone offense just wasn't completely atrocious, Bama still wins that game, because this is not a great Georgia team. This to me was probably the two best teams in college football this year from beginning to end. But both of these teams really got smacked by Bama last year. Like last year's Bama team, 2019 LSU, 2019 Clemson, 2018 LSU or Clemson and Alabama. 2017 Georgia would have smacked both of these teams last night.
Yeah.
And so, there's takeaways. Well, hey, look, you don't need an elite quarterback. Look, every 5 or 6 years, there's going to be that year where there just aren't great teams. A team has such a great talent that they don't need a great quarterback, like we saw Bama in 2015 with Jacob Coker. Just because they won with Stetson Bennett doesn't mean everybody else needs to go find the next Stetson Bennett, right? It was a fortunate circumstance for Georgia, and they did what they needed to do. Notre Dame did not.
Agreed.
And that's the thing at the end of the day that kind of frustrated me. This is why we said this is the year. But Brian Kelly never gave Notre Dame a chance to maximize its talent as a football team. And that's ultimately why Notre Dame finished the season 8th. instead of being in the college football playoff where
Oh, is
they
that where
should have
they
been.
ended up? 8th place?
Yeah, it
Okay.
came out today.
Okay.
And and it just kind of makes me happy to say, hey, look, this is why I'm glad Brian Kelly's gone. Because somebody on the message board brought up yesterday, and it was a really good question. Is like, what if Brian Kelly would have made an offensive line and receiver change before the season? And my thought was this would have been a much better team, but they still would have come up short in the big games because they still had Brian Kelly as the head coach.
Sure.
They still would have not had the right attitude. They would have played conservatively, whatever the case may be, because Brian Kelly was still going to be pulling the strings on offense. At the end of the day, changes this last. If Brian Kelly would have just listened to everything we said last year, let's just say hypothetically, because obviously we think that would have worked. Otherwise, we wouldn't freaking say it. But let's say he would have listened to us and that stuff would have worked. I still don't think Brian Kelly has the mindset to win a championship. So ultimately, even though it sucks to see another missed opportunity, to me, it's worth it because we're finally seeing a change. Now, I don't know if Marcus Freeman is that guy, but I know Brian Kelly ain't that guy.
Well, that's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah,
I mean, that's part of what we're going to talk about anyway. And I will say I found it funny that correct me if I'm wrong because I'm doing this by memory. But didn't Bryce Young throw the exact same amount of passes that Jack Cohn threw in the Fiesta Bowl?
It was close. I mean, I'd have to go look, but it was close. I
thought it was 57 and 57.
Yeah.
I thought that's what it was.
Well, no, Jack Cohn threw 68 passes.
Okay.
He threw
so it was
68 passes,
okay.
11 more. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So no, he went 35 of 57 for 369 yards, a touchdown, and 2 picks. Jack Cohn went 38 of 68 for over 500 yards. So and 5 touchdowns. So yeah, Jack Cohn had a much better performance against Oklahoma State's defense, which was a top 5 defense than Bryce Young had, but it was a much bigger. I mean,
sure,
it was a much bigger spotlight for Bryce
Absolutely.
Young, and he was a sophomore compared to Jack. I'm just pointing out the statistics. Is all that I'm saying.
To me, all the talk was about how Notre Dame threw the ball too much, and I'm not hearing that as much about Alabama. We're saying it.
But what people are saying is, it's because Georgia's defense is so good. Well, I would argue the same thing about Oklahoma State's defense. They had a very, very good rush defense, and it is.
I get it. You still, but again, just like we talked about after the Notre Dame Oklahoma State game,
right?
You still can't be one-dimensional and expect to be really, really good.
Right.
You still have to have the threat of.
You have to have some balance, exactly.
Yeah, some balance, exactly. So,
and Alabama's inability to develop that this year was it was a problem. I mean, it didn't just show up last night. This is kind of what you and I had said about Bama even being in the playoff. I mean, they deserve to be in the playoff because they beat Georgia. But had they not beat Georgia, this is why we said that they didn't deserve to be in. These things that we saw last night didn't just pop up last night.
Right.
Absolutely. This was an issue against Florida, which is why they almost lost to Florida, who had a losing record this year. It's why they almost lost to LSU, who had a losing record this year. It's why they almost lost to Auburn, who had a losing record this year. It's why they only beat Arkansas by a touchdown. The reality is this is an offense that really could run the ball with any consistency. I mean, you just look at their season, like they had 91 rushing yards against Florida and then 211 against Southern Miss, 210 against Mississippi State, 195 against Mississippi State, 203 against Tennessee, then 6 against LSU, 247 against New Mexico State. But then the next 3 games where they barely beat Arkansas, barely beat Auburn, and then blew out Georgia, they went for 112, 71, and 115. And then, of course, against Cincinnati was giving them the run, and they took advantage of it and ran the ball great. And then they didn't even try to run the ball last night. 28 carries for 30 yards. And, I'm trying to think of I'm trying to look here real quick how many sacks Georgia had. Georgia had 4 sacks, so you're talking barely 20. There's a couple Bryce Young scrambles, so you're talking barely 20 pass attempts in a game that was within a score until the very end when they had to pick 6. Just no attempt to try to and then when they finally did use the backs out of the backfield to just get something going, they had some success. And it was Bill O'Brien trying to prove how smart he was as opposed to building around the players you had. And, that's just why I've never been a big Bill O'Brien fan. He got out coached last night.
Oh,
Dan Lanning coached circles around Bill O'Brien last night. And that's why Georgia's the champs. And sorry, just but that's why they are. And
but you know what? It's not Michigan, so
yeah,
I'm okay.
Yeah. Well, and we've now seen
I would have been a day.
Yeah.
I would be wearing all black if
if
Michigan had won.
Oh, Alabama would have killed Michigan.
Oh, I know they would have. You're absolutely right about that. But it's still, I'd rather have Georgia all day.
But this is now the second time in the last 6-7 years we've seen a team win a title that hadn't won a title for a while.
True.
Now, obviously, Clemson hadn't won a title since I think 81, right?
Georgia
hadn't won a title since the year before in 80.
Yeah.
So look, if you make the right moves and you make the right hires, you can go from pretty good to a championship team. I mean, Georgia wasn't a team that was – you had the 1 year in 2012 or maybe if they complete this one, but they were a team that was a really good team for a while. Like Notre Dame is a really good team right now, but they were clearly not on the level of Bama. They were not on the level of what Ohio State was and teams like that. They made a coaching change. He made changes within the program, started recruiting better, started hiring good coaches, and bam, you're sitting here now and Georgia's got a national championship. Sorry, it's just not a big Kirby Smart fan in case you haven't noticed. I don't like him personally.
Yeah.
So it makes me sick that he won. I was rooting for Bama last night. That's how bad I hate Kirby Smart. I wanted Bama to win last night.
It's crazy.
I have to think about whether or not I root for LSU or Georgia when they play. I actually generally have to think about that. That's how much I dislike Kirby Smart.
I just didn't have any rooting interest at all. I didn't care. It didn't I wasn't excited either way. I mean, I was hoping for a good game. I was actually surprised I stayed up and watched the entire thing, but I did. And I guess I didn't want Alabama to win again, but at the same time, it didn't move the needle for me in any way, no matter who won. So
Vince, let's talk about kind of where things are right now for Notre Dame, because look, I think the thing that I will say is this is the closest Notre Dame has been to a championship football team, just as a whole.
Agreed.
Since 1993. Right now, we're talking about not just a team, but as a program.
Right.
I want to use that word because Lou Emoji used to do this all the time. He would talk about there's a difference between a team and a program. A team is kind of like that individual season. He talked about having a championship program, and that's kind of where the conversation is where is Notre Dame, not just for 2022, but kind of looking forward? Where is Notre Dame from a coaching standpoint, from a recruiting standpoint? And then we're going to go position by position and talk about where Notre Dame is. And either A, it's one of three things, right? A, that's a championship level situation, right? B, they're close, but here's what they need to do. Or C, they're not close right now at that spot. And that's where we're gonna talk about, and where Notre Dame needs to get to. And we're gonna give as an objective as we possibly can, honest look at where Notre Dame is. And as we go through each, so I'd like all of you to hold off on giving your comments overall,
right,
and try to stay in the chat because I want to see what you guys are saying as we touch on each position group. Then share your opinion in the chat about the specific topic that we're discussing. and so if we're talking about the quarterbacks, don't be talking about the D line. Let's try to get everybody kind of on the same page here. So what we're talking about, I want you guys talking about. So Vince, let's start off with the offense and where things stand, because this is the group to me that we have said is the one that's furthest away.
It's the furthest away. Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't think that that's going too far out on a limb, to be perfectly honest with you. And so what we're going to do is obviously we're going to go position by position, but we're also going to talk about coaching. And we're going to talk about the offensive coaching and then the defensive coaching. Are we going to do coaching overall, Brian, or are we just going to stick with?
Well, I kind of think it's overall is going to be within the framework of the positions that we're talking about, right?
Okay.
So overall doesn't matter as much as each position group to me. You know what I mean? So we'll stick, I think, to the more
specific, the side of the ball specific.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So let's start with coaching offensively. Tommy Rees, we still don't know who the wide receiver coach is, although things are starting to narrow down.
Well, let's go ahead and discuss that real quick. So I believe today Notre Dame will be interviewing Jamarcus Shepard,
Right.
who is the wide receivers coach at Purdue. We have reported at Irish Breakdown really for a couple weeks now that Jamarcus Shepard and Holman Wiggins from Alabama are the top 2 candidates for the job. There's the interview has to go well today, kind of like when Marcus Freeman was hired as the head coach. You may think you have your guy going in, and I believe Notre Dame is going into the interview today thinking that Jamarcus Shepard is going to be that guy. And from as what we reported, this is why you need a membership to Irish Breakdown, because you would have known this yesterday.
That's right.
But I believe this is where Notre Dame wants, and this is who I think Jamarcus Shepard wants. And so Shepard is not going to Washington right now. That is a falsehood that was put out on Twitter. This is why you don't believe random Twitter accounts that claim to have sources, okay? Because otherwise Jamarcus Shepard's the receivers coach at Washington right now. He is on campus today, I believe, and going through an interview with Notre Dame. I believe that it is today, unless things have changed. And if things go as according to plan, I believe that's the guy that Notre Dame has targeted and identified.
No, which is an upgrade from where they were. And I think we can all agree that offensive line has been upgraded.
Yes.
Okay. I'm tempering the excitement, but
let's look, man. This is the offseason, man.
We're talking about
Notre Dame winning a title. Look, I'll just say it like this, Vince, plain and simple. If Jamarcus Shepard or Holman Wiggins is hired, and I think it's going to be Jamarcus Shepard, so we're going to work with the thought of he's going to be the guy. You look at him, adding Harry Heastand. Chris Watt is going to be coming back in an analyst role. Some kind of either analyst, GA, I'm not quite sure which
that sets you up for the future. I mean,
I think so. Yeah. But just for the immediate, it's huge to have that guy, somebody that Harry Heastand trusts completely. You've got Lance Taylor, who has proven to be, in my opinion, one of the 10 best running back coaches in college football. Good recruiter, great coach, right?
Yep.
Now, can he upgrade his recruiting efforts? Yeah, I'd like to see him do that. I think there's room for him to improve as a recruiter, but he's still done a pretty good job. And then you've got a tight ends coach who's done a good job, right? I mean, John McNulty's done – I mean, Michael Mayer just broke every single season Notre Dame receptions record, like shattered them, and – as a sophomore. And I mean, John McNulty's a good coach. You just hired one of the best offensive line coaches in football. I think Jamarcus Shepard's one of the 5 best receiver coaches in college football. I mean, Purdue just put over 500 yards in receiving against and passing against Tennessee without David Bell. He didn't even play in the game. And the job he does in teaching route running and getting open and just the finer points of the game is phenomenal. This is going to be the best if they make this hire. This will be Notre Dame's best offensive coach having a while, because I'm high on Tommy Rees. I mean, everybody knows my stance. I didn't want Tommy Rees in 2020. But what we said at the time was, by making that move, it does set you up for the future, because he's going to get that experience. And I think we saw a lot of growth from Tommy Rees this last year. I think there's some areas where Tommy Rees maybe didn't do as good of a job early on in his tenure, where he was much better later. Now, there's still room for him to improve. Getting off the script and still being able to be creative and do those kind of things is something that all young coordinators develop and improve upon. But I think he's got a chance to be great. But I just didn't feel like the offensive coordinator was the problem this year. I thought the offensive coordinator situation was pretty good in the final 7 games of the year. It was, you're coaching with one hand tied behind your back because your offensive line and receiver coaching situations were so bad. Well, you went from having that being a weakness of your football team to arguably 2 of your biggest strengths of your football team with the 2 hires that Marcus Freeman is trying to make. And so if he's able to pull those off, and obviously Harry Heastand, we believe to be a done deal with the offensive line. But if he's able to land Jamarcus Shepard or Holman Wiggins, either one, and again, my personal feeling is that I don't really care. I think they're both phenomenal coaches. I think they'd both be home run hires. I don't think either is better than the other. And if you were to argue, I'd probably lean a little bit towards Shepard in regards to the just tremendous job he's done at a place that's recruiting and coaching in a place that's not really easy to recruit or coach. I think the fact that he has been a part of a pass offense that's been one of the best in college football from a production standpoint, despite playing in Indiana, meaning he knows what it takes to have great passing games in the winter and in the north. All those things fit together. You now just turn 2 of your biggest weaknesses into 2 of your biggest strengths. And if they're able to pull that off, it's a huge, huge props to Marcus Freeman, but also huge kudos to Tommy Rees, because I've talked to multiple sources on both sides of these coaching searches, and Tommy Rees has been very involved in this. And Marcus Freeman is allowing Tommy Rees to do what Marcus Freeman always wanted as a coordinator, which is give the OC, give the coordinator the room to say, hey, who do you want? And Tommy Rees is the one. And Coach Freeman's been involved, but Tommy Rees is the one that said, I want Harry Easton back. I want Chris Watt back. I want Jamarcus Shepard. And you just now surrender. The sign of a good coach is that someone with a big ego and a big personality, and Tommy Rees has a big ego and a big personality, and I don't think you can be a great coach without a big ego. Can we just be honest about that?
That's right? Absolutely true.
I'm not talking arrogance, like ego meaning you're a jerk. I'm talking ego meaning, yes, I am smart. Yes, I can do a great job here. Yes, I am fully confident in my ability to be great and be a champion here. That's ego, right? But that's a good ego. You want to have that confidence. But the great coaches are the ones that believe that, and it's actually true, but they also know that I can't do it by myself, and I'm going to surround myself with other big personalities and other great coaches. And look, if you don't have to spend much time getting to learn Jamarcus Shepard to realize he's a big personality. Harry Easton is a dominating presence. If you're insecure about yourself and your role, you don't hire people like Harry Easton and Jamarcus Shepard around you. You don't bring in an NFL guy like John McNulty if you don't value surrounding yourself with excellence. And I think that says a lot about Tommy Rees, that he realized this is where we fell short. This is where we need to get to. Let's go get the best. And man, so if they do end up with Jamarcus Shepard, to me, from a coaching standpoint, Notre Dame has just put themselves in a place where I'm not going to be able to blame the coaching for problems moving forward. I mean, year one, there's going to be some growth and all that, but by year two, by 2023, if this staff stays together for the most part, good Lord, this is going to be an elite coaching situation on offense, in my opinion. Yeah, I truly believe that.
I agree with you. I think right now, today, based on where everything is at, I'm putting them, because we got three categories, right? We've got championship level, we've got close, and we've got not close, right? I think they're close. Because I just need to see. I need to see a little bit more. I think they have the right pieces in place. Yes, and that's the biggest one, because he's the head coach of the offense,
right?
And so I need to see more from Tommy Rees. I love what he's doing. I think his trajectory is where it needs to be. I really like it. I think, and I think you said this, but I think he needs to be a little bit more creative at times. I think he needs to not be as married to the script at times, right? Or willing to go back to the script at times, right? I mean, I there's a little bit of both of that. So I put close. I put that they're close at the moment, but they can very easily get up to that championship level pretty quickly. And by this season even, right? Depending on how things shake out the first couple of years. But I think they have all the pieces in place. The upgrades that they made to offensive line and wide receiver are phenomenal. I mean, those were the two weak points, and now they could be potentially the two strengths of this staff, right? I mean, it's a huge upgrade. And so they made the right decisions to get rid of, and then who they added, and that's huge. So it's like if A is championship, they're pushing that A envelope right now, but I still need to see a little bit more.
Yeah, I think Tommy Rees has to. I mean, look, he has to prove he can do this in a big game, right? And I think he would tell you that. Like, the thing I would say is, I think they're very close. I think they've got championship talent. Yes. Now they have to prove this staff can kind of come together and go do it in a big moment in a big stage. You know,
right? Championship talent from a coaching perspective,
right? Correct. You know, Tommy Rees has got to be able to. Look, in a game like the Fiesta Bowl against Oklahoma State, has to be able to push the right buttons. Because, look, you and I can give him a pass because we understand that he was coaching with I mean, you could argue two hands tied behind the back with the O-line and the run game and the receivers that don't know how to go the press.
His creativity to overcome some of that at times, I think really showed some of his coaching chops.
Correct.
I do. Yeah, correct. I do.
Now, we're going to either be proven right or wrong, because that's not going to be an excuse anymore. you're not going to be able to blame receiver coaching and O-line coaching on issues now. So I think that he went out and made the right decisions. Now it's time for this staff to go prove it. But from a talent standpoint, I think they're there. I think this is a championship caliber coaching staff on offense. What they have to prove to me now, Vince, is that they can go out and do the offseason together, right? Which means, you look, building a champion doesn't just happen with your 15-play script and then what you do next against Ohio State, right? It starts now. It starts with what's your offseason preparation going to look like? How are you going to build around the talent that you have? How are you going to, work on practice to create the right kind of competition but then also to create the right kind of continuity? One of the issues that you and I had this year was with the offensive line is they did so much moving around and they never settled on where guys were going to play that we were concerned about the continuity of that group by the time the season started, and that's exactly what happened. So
that's what it was in the spring. There was so much movement,
and they did it in the fall too,
yeah,
right? And that's the thing is, like we said, by the time you get to fall, you got to have this thing figured out, and they didn't. And it created communication problems, all that kind of stuff. And to me, when you look at that's part of building an offseason. Okay, we're going to move guys around to see who fits where in the spring because you've got new coaches and all that kind of stuff. But you got to have a fit. You got to have an idea of where you're at by the time you get to fall camp. How are you building to that? All those things go into building a championship unit, right? And to me, that's where they need to be. I think the talent is there from a coaching standpoint. Now it's just about putting it all together, in my opinion.
Agreed. So let's start rolling. Yeah. Let's roll through some of these positions. Let's start quarterback. The quarterback room right now is Tyler Buckner, Drew Pine, and then Steve Angeli is coming in. Obviously, I think is he an early enrollee, Brian?
He is.
He is. Okay. So he's on campus right now. First day of classes is today. So he's there. Let's see. So quarterback, I personally have them as a close at the moment because there's still question marks about Tyler Buckner. Now, for me personally, I think he can be a championship level quarterback.
Yeah, it's similar to the coaching situation.
It's very similar.
The talent is there.
Yes.
But there's a lot to prove.
Yes. Which is why I'm not a proponent of going out and getting a Jackson Dart, for example. Right.
I think Tyler Buckner's better than Jackson Dart.
I do too. I agree with you. And I just think he needs to. I'm excited to see what happens now that he's going to be at least competing for QB1. Like, what is this going to look like now that he's going to get starters reps? Because again, he was getting third string reps all season and plus his package or whatever. But what is he going to look like if he's getting starter reps? Right. And so I think he can be a championship level quarterback. And so that's why I have them, again, very similar to the coaching. It's B, but I think they can get to an A. And so,
I'm not handing out like grades like that. I mean, it's to me that's not where I'm at.
That's not what I meant. The way I have it written here is A is champ, B is close, C is So it's more like multiple choice, not grades. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So my multiple choice is the second one, which is close, moving into the first one.
Gotcha.
I
just want to point out that the team that won the national championship last night, their offensive coordinator was also their quarterback's coach. I just want to point that out since there's the discussion going on that every Alabama team that's won a championship under Saban, and it's 6, right? He's won 6, correct? Mm-hmm. So 9, 11, 12, 15, 17, and then last year he's won 6. And all 6 of those years, the quarterback's coach and the offensive coordinator are the same human being. So I just want to point that out for the people that are just adamant that there's only one way to do it, and it's their way is right and my way is wrong, whatever. I'm just pointing out evidence that, teams are winning championships with quarterback coaches who also coach the offense as a whole. So anyway, to me, it's about my confidence in the quarterback room begins with Tyler Buckner and ends with Drew Pine, because I don't think it's just Tyler Buckner, because I don't think you can just have one quarterback you can win with.
Sure.
I'm still a believer that Drew Pine can. I mean, look, I have more. Like everybody's like, oh, Stetson Bennett is Ian Book, and I'm like, no, Ian Book had
No.
way better physical tools than Stetson Bennett.
Yep.
The difference is Stetson Bennett was a gutsy, gritty kid that was more than willing to attempt big-time throws. He made 7 or 8 throws last night. Ian Book would never even attempt in a big game. Drew Pine is the guy that if you want to say, okay, you want to compare some to Notre Dame to Stetson Bennett, it's Drew Pine, not Ian Book, because Drew Pine will take chances. Drew Pine is a lot more confident than you might think for a guy with his God-given ability. And so to me, it's the two of them. And somebody asked what happens if Pine outplays Buckner in the spring, and Pine starts.
Yeah.
That's what happens.
And that means that Pine had a really good spring.
And my opinion doesn't change.
Right.
Because I'm a lot higher on Drew Pine than a lot of other people. And so I believe that the quarterback room is close. The guys that are there have to prove it, but they got to go out and recruit better. The 2023 class is going to be very important. You've got to get a big-time quarterback in 2023 because it's about building for future success as well. And Steve Angeli's a nice player, but he's just not quite there yet. And somebody said Tyler Buckner put up dart-like numbers as a junior in high school, and John Zabrowski said Tyler Jackson threw 67 TDs as a senior, brother. Hey, John, brother, Tyler Buckner had more total touchdowns than Jackson Dart in one less game as a junior in high school because last I checked, rushing touchdowns count the same as passing touchdowns. And Jackson Dart had 67 passing touchdowns. Tyler Buckner had 50, I think it was 53 to 55. Jackson Dart had 12 rushing touchdowns. Tyler Buckner he had 53 passing touchdowns compared to 67 for Jackson Dart. Tyler Buckner had 26 rushing touchdowns compared to 12 for Jackson Dart in one fewer game. Tyler Buckner played 13 games as a junior. Jackson Dart played 14, and Tyler Buckner had more yards and more total touchdowns. So I don't believe you get brownie points for it being a passing touchdown. So with all due respect, that's just not a good comeback.
And again, we're comparing high school numbers, guys.
But the point is why are people thinking
exactly.
Jackson Dart's this big time quarterback? Because look at the numbers he's put up. Well, Buckner put up even better numbers. Well, what about competition? Jackson Dart's from Utah,
right? How much? Yeah, exactly. That's all that you can just period.
Yeah, I stopped talking.
Yeah.
So anyway, to me, the quarterback talent is there, but at the end of the day, talent doesn't win you a championship. Producing wins you a championship, right? Because you can have all the talent in the world, but if you don't produce, you're not going to be effective. So to me, quarterback is close from a talent standpoint. They're a long way away from a production standpoint, especially in big games. Long way away. So to me, Notre Dame is kind of in category 2 and 3. 2 from a talent standpoint, 3 from a production standpoint. If those two things come together, then they become in the first category, which is they're good enough. They're not there yet, but to me, they're close. But I would argue that Notre Dame has been close from a talent standpoint for a while. The problem is they don't play to their talent. That's been an issue for a decade. What we're going to find out in 2022 was that a Brian Kelly thing, or has Brian Kelly got a bad rap for that? That's what we're going to start to. We're not going to know the whole answer in 2022, but we're going to start to see that answer. And so quarterback is there. Vince, I think tight end is a position we can say we don't need to spend a lot of time talking about tight end. I think that position is obvious. That's a championship level tight end group. It's been that way for a while.
Yep. I have 2 championship level groups on the offense.
Right.
I do.
What's the other one?
Offensive line. I think they can be. I think that they have the talent, and now they have the coach to be in a championship level. And here's the other reason I will say that. Because Clemson won championships with a subpar offensive line, okay? I feel like Notre Dame, at the very, very least, can be Clemson championship football from an offensive line standpoint, but I think that they're better than that, okay? And I think a year under the belt of Joe Alt and Blake Fisher, and you're getting Patterson back, and now I think Lugg is probably going to be – he's either going to start at right guard or he's going to be your sixth man again. I just think this team, this offensive line is shaping up to be really, really good. And with Heaston and Watt coaching them, I'm sorry, that's the X factor for me. That takes them from Now they're close to championship level.
Right.
And those are my two groups.
I would say they're not there
confident in that.
yet. I would say the talent is there, and now the coaching is there. But what we haven't seen yet, Vince, is how will that coaching and that talent mesh together? So that's why I'm not ready to put it there yet, but I think it will be. If Harry Hiestand is what we think he is, if the talent is what we think it'll be with Matt Balis, I think it's going to be there. I think it's going to be there. It's just, to me, I just got to see how these kids react to Coach Hiestand before I'm willing to go there. But I think that's where having Chris Watt back is going to be huge, because Chris Watt can be sort of like the Harry Hiestand whisperer.
Yes.
You know, I think his role is going to be, hey, let me do the screaming and cussing and all that. And it's your job to kind of come in and, you know, put your arm around him and tell him what I meant, you know, and like, and tell him, hey, listen, I played for Coach Hiestand. You don't think I got MF'd every now and then? But this is why it made me a third-round NFL draft pick, despite the fact, look at me, I'm like 6'1.5", and I'm not that big of a guy, and I'm not super, you know, but here's why. And I think that's going to help. That's going to be tremendous to have. You know what it's like? Chris Watt is – did you ever see the Key and Peele skit where they had the one guy was like the Obama interpreter? So like Obama would say something all like normal, and then this guy would come in and just like be super fired up and like say what he really meant to say. It's like that's what Chris Watt's going to be, but the opposite, right?
Yeah,
like
exactly.
Harry is going to say all these like he's just going to rip, and then it's Chris Watt's job to teach them how to take that the right way, how to take that properly. And I think that combination is going to be electric. So I think the talent in coaching is there, Vince. But if I'm being honest and objective, I got to see how it meshes together first before I can say it's definitely there. But I think I'll say this: they have done everything they need to do to get it there.
Right.
That's the thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That's the thing. I am projecting a little bit. There's no question. I'm projecting, but I have the most faith from a projection standpoint that group will be championship level when they need to be. That's where I'm at. So it is projection, but I have a lot of faith in that projection right now.
Right.
So running backs,
I think they're close.
That's what I have.
I think they're close.
They have talent there. I think if Logan Diggs is still in a Notre Dame uniform next year, if for some reason he leaves, and this is not me knowing anything, I'm just saying because that's out there, right? Mm-hmm. If he leaves, I lose a little faith in the running back room. Obviously.
I don't.
Really?
No, I don't, because I still feel like you can win a championship with Chris Tyree, Audric Estime, and Jadarian Price. You know, I do. Now, is it even better? Is your margin – what happens, Vince, is your margin for error narrows greatly if you lose Logan Diggs.
Okay.
And now you can't have an injury. You can't have somebody not being as good as you think they're going to be, right? Everything has to go perfectly.
Yeah.
If Logan comes back – you've now got 3 returners that are ready to be studs, and you're not thrusting Jadarian Price into the mix right away.
But he can compete, and he can potentially.
If you have to play Jadarian Price in 2022, Notre Dame's going to be fine, in my opinion. That kid can flat out play. Now they've got to then restock the depth chart with the 2023 class and all those kind of things. But you know, I look at it. I'm confident. I'm confident in the talent there, because I don't think you need elite running back. Like you point to like 5-star backs and all that stuff, and you say, you know, Georgia had a bunch of 5-star backs, but like, you know, outside of one run by James Cook, I mean, you know, they didn't really, you know, play great last night, because you're always running the ball. You're always going to kind of be. It's always going to be more about the line than it is the backs in most instances. And to me, I look at Notre Dame's backfield in 2022, I think it's going to be better than it was in 2017, to be honest with you. And so I think that's kind of where, I guess I'm just not someone who believes you necessarily need to have elite players there. I think you need really good players, guys that fit your system, guys that can do a little bit of everything, and I think that's what Notre Dame has. I think the talent is there, in my opinion.
Okay.
It's close. I think the key for me is how are you going to use that talent correctly? I think that's going to be more of a question mark for me, is do you use Chris Tyree better than you did in the
Yes.
past 2 years.
And that's going to be really important. That's a
Right.
really important part of this equation is how is Chris Tyree used?
Right.
I completely agree with that.
Right.
Yeah, that's a really good
Right.
point. Yep.
So yeah, it's close, but it's not there yet. It's they got to go prove it. They got to go prove it. But
I have him as close. I have him as close.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, to me, I think you got four top 150 caliber backs on your roster.
Sure.
And one being a top 100 guy in Chris Tyree, in my opinion. But it's about using Chris Tyree effectively and correctly, which we started to see a little bit in the bowl game.
Right.
I mean, okay, yeah, the running game's not there because your own line's getting blasted. So find other ways to get Chris Tyree the ball.
And they
6
did.
catches for 120 plus yards. You know what I mean? So that's because people focus too much on rushing. It's about production. And I don't care if you score by 5 passing touchdowns or 5 rushing touchdowns, just get the 5 touchdowns. I don't care if a running back has 180 yards and 120 of them are receiving and 60 of them are rushing or vice versa. Just get the yards. Get the yards, get the points at the end of the day. In today's game, you can do more of that.
Yes.
And that's, to me, is.
So wide receiver is the last position group that we need to talk about, Brian.
And you know what, Vince? Can I call a little bit of an audible? Because I'm enjoying this conversation, and I really want to not rush the defensive one.
Okay.
Let's just talk offense today.
Oh, okay.
Right?
Yeah,
let's just kind of continue focusing the offense because otherwise
I was getting nervous as I was looking at the clock, so I like this.
Because I do want to focus on this stuff because I want to talk about some things that I think they need to do offensively to get to that level. But when we talk about wide receiver right now, they're not there yet. There's a lot of work that needs to be done.
I agree.
And this is the position I would argue they're furthest away, but it's not because of the talent. I think the depth is a problem, and I think that this group has been so poorly coached that it may take
it's not going to be overnight.
Take a little bit of time to do it. I think that's the key for me.
It's not going to be overnight, but at the same time, there are little things that you can do in practice, whether it's drill work, whether it's in the film room, or whatever the case may be, where I think you're going to see a noticeable difference from this group.
Oh, sure. And I think it can be fixed by 2022 season. This isn't a thing where it's like, well, it's going to take to 2023. No. It's just what I'm saying is there's a lot more work that needs to be done here than at some other places. And I'd say that's why I'm not ready to go there yet with the offensive line, because there's some deprogramming that Harry Heastand's going to have to do.
Yes.
Right? There's some like for Tommy Reese and the quarterbacks, it's just about, hey, you got the talent. You've been doing some good things, coach. Now just take it to that next step. Same thing with the tight end. It's already there. Running back, Lance Taylor's done a phenomenal coaching job, in my opinion.
Agreed.
It's just I think he needs to recruit a little bit better. But I think he's an excellent position coach. I really do. I think that schematically there's some things they need to do differently to use different backs in different ways and not just kind of plug them all into the same run game. But they're really close there. With running back or with O-line and receiver, why I'm a little more hesitant than you are at the O-line and why we're both hesitant at the receiver is you got to tear stuff down first before you can build it back up. And I'm not talking about tearing down the players, like getting on them. I'm talking about like, hey, everything you learned before, forget all that crap. And we're starting over with. Like,
forget it.
If I'm Harry Heastand or Jamarcus Shepard, I'm saying that the one thing I never want to hear come out of in your mouth is, well, the way we used to do it, I don't want to hear that.
Yeah.
There's a reason I'm here and that guy's not. Okay. You don't say it quite like that because you respect people that you respect people in the profession more than that. But you say, like, I don't want to hear anything about the way you did it. I've been brought here to make you a championship unit. And here's the way I'm going to do it. And we're going to do it my way. And your first spring is going to be about not just teaching the way you do it, but you got to figure out, you got to drill it in a way that you're deprogramming some of the things that you see on film that were problems, right? And so that's the challenge that I think Coach Heastand and whoever the receivers coach is, and we've talked about who we think it's going to be.
Sure.
But that's the challenge that they have, Vince, is that you've got to deprogram some stuff first. Absolutely. And I don't know how long that's going to take. Now, here's the good news. This is going to be a relatively young group of receivers. the next 2 years. And some of the guys, I mean, you're going to lean a lot more on Deion Colzie and Tobias Merriweather and Lorenzo Styles next year than you maybe otherwise would have. That means there's less deprogramming with those guys. Number one, you don't have to deprogram Tobias Merriweather at all. Tobias Merriweather's already a better route runner than all but maybe 2 guys on Notre Dame's roster right now because of what he learned in high school. So he's going to come in and he's going to be a bit of a blank slate from a coaching standpoint at college. Deion Colzie didn't get coached a ton this year. Lorenzo Styles is kind of already pretty well coached, I think, coming into high school or coming into college. But even then, there's less deprogramming you have to do with those guys. And I think that's going to help. But like with Braden Lindsey, there's a lot of bad habits that Braden Lindsey's developed that you're going to have to beat out of him. When I say beat out, I'm referring to drill work. It's about beat out of him. It's a figure of speech.
Taking him out back.
Yeah, you don't like throw a baseball bat at the back of his head every time he runs a route wrong. It's not what I'm talking about. It's just an expression, right?
Oh,
you have to beat that out of him, and that may take a little bit more time.
Yeah,
and so same with like Joe Wilkins. He's got some bad habits when it comes to route running and catching the ball that he learned from the previous coach that you kind of got to beat out of him a little bit. And so to me, the how long that takes is going to determine how quickly this receiving core gets going. But I think the talent is there. I think that they just need more of it.
Yeah,
is the key.
Yeah,
they need more of it.
The depth worries me. I think the frontline guys can compete with just about anybody, and I like that. Again,
talent, potential wise.
Exactly. The caveat is if they're going to get coached properly. That's
right.
Always the caveat here. But from a talent standpoint, I think that they can compete with anybody. But I have them as a not close to close. Like before, I was like they're close and almost to championship level. The wide receivers are not close, but they're almost to close. Like that's where I've got the wide receivers. I think they can get there, but man, this is the on the offensive side for me. This is where the most proof needs to be shown to me, right? I mean, it's where I'm going to need to see it the most. And a lot of it has to do with also how they're going to be utilized. Again, we talked about Chris Tyree being utilized in a certain way from a running back position. Well, the same thing goes for Braden Lindsey. I mean, he's not – you can't just line him up like you did Chase Claypool and expect the same – or Will Fuller, for example, and expect the same. You got to be creative with Braden Lindsey. And I think they touched on that. They started to go there in the Fiesta Bowl, but with a whole offseason.
And I would say they kind of started doing it later in the year, too. Saw it against Stanford a little bit, you know, where they did some things. And
that's what I want to see. And again, that goes back to the coaching part and Tommy Rees and the fact that I'm very confident in what he can do, but we need to see it. And so if Tommy Rees brings his A game and he gets to a championship level, that's going to upgrade a lot of these positions, right? It's going to upgrade
because the supporting cast now, I think, from a coaching standpoint, is there.
Yes,
that's a big key for me. And now it's about you've had some really good receiver classes, but you've got to get rid of the inconsistency where one year it's great and the next year it's you don't have anybody left from the position group, and we've seen too much of that. 18 was a really good receiver class, but 17 and 19 were not. You don't have anybody left from the 19 roster, the 19 receiving core at receiver. You don't have anybody left from the 2020 receiver class at receiver. You can't have those anymore. You can't have, Tobias Merriweather might be the most physically gifted receiver on the roster, but he's the only guy in a year where you needed at least three. Like those are the things you've got to fix as the receivers coach, right? But they've been able to get talented players. It's just those guys haven't been coached up. And that's what I'm excited to see.
Exactly.
I mean, we just saw a guy that with Jamarcus Shepard, for example, if he is the guy, he just he had David Bell, who's had a great season. I wouldn't say that David Bell's more physically talented than Kevin Austin. I wouldn't say that at all.
No, I wouldn't either.
He's a talented kid, but he's not as big as Kevin Austin. I don't think he's as fast as Kevin Austin. He's just a better wide receiver than Kevin Austin because he knows how to play the game. And after that's like Milton Wright and Jackson Anthrop and guys like that are who they are having a top 5 pass offense with, and I had somebody say, well, yeah, they had to throw the ball because they couldn't run it. I'm like, yeah, that adds even more. Adds even more to how good their pass offense was because they didn't have elite players. They didn't have a great O-line. They had a walk-on quarterback.
Yeah.
And everybody knew they had to throw it. And they still threw the ball and had some big-time games. And so, and a lot of it was because those receivers know how to play the game, and Jeff Brom's a really smart guy. And here's the interesting thing about Jamarcus Shepard. If they're able to land him, the one thing I said, if you remember when Notre Dame was getting ready to play Purdue, I said if Tommy Rees wants to sort of follow coaches, instead of the NFL guys like Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan, because NFL and college are different ball games to a degree.
Yeah.
Jeff Brom is a guy at the collegiate level he needs to follow and kind of look up to because he does he's a pro-style coach that knows how to throw the football. And I think the fact that Notre Dame is going to be able to get somebody from that staff if they get Jamarcus Shepard, to me, is huge. Because he's not just going to help you from how to teach receivers, but he's just going to have another way of looking at things. And the other thing about Jamarcus Shepard, too, is he's coached under Jeff Brom, Mike Leach, and Bobby Petrino in his career. That's 3 great offensive minds. So he's had time in an air raid offense, which is just for 1 year at Washington State. But he's had a lot of time under Petrino and Brom because he was with Brom at Western Kentucky as well. And some of the numbers that his receivers put up at Western Kentucky were just stupid. He had 1 year where 4 different guys had over 800 yards receiving. It's just stupid. And, to me, that Vince is also going to bring something to it because he is a pro-style coach.
Sure.
So that it's going to be the transition is going to be easy and smooth.
Yeah, somebody said that Tommy Rees wants to be an air raid coach. No, he
does not. Tommy Rees wants to be a pro-style NFL coach. Yeah,
and he threw the ball in the Fiesta Bowl because he had to.
And throwing doesn't equal air raid.
It's also very true. Yes, but that's what people are. 500 yards. They want to be an air raid. No,
that doesn't make air raid is a style of system. I mean, correct. You look at Purdue this year. Purdue. Okay, so if you look at the top 5 passing teams in the country this year, Western Kentucky, Virginia, Ohio State, Mississippi State, and Purdue. I don't know what Western Kentucky's offense is. I don't know if they're air raid or not. Virginia's not an air raid offense. Ohio State's not an air raid offense, and Purdue's not an air raid offense. Ohio State and Purdue are very pro-style spread, is what they are. And that's what Tommy Rees is. He's a pro-style spread coach.
Yep.
And so they're not an air raid offense. He doesn't want to be an air raid coach. RPOs aren't an air raid only offense. Steve Sarkisian uses them. Lane Kiffin uses them. They're also pro-style spread coaches. So that's what Tommy Rees wants to be, and that's been Jamarcus Shepard's entire background outside of 1 year with Mike Leach. So that is incorrect. But I just, when I look at it, Vince, to me, receiver is a lot closer than it needs to be in our opinion. I'll say this. I feel like a lot of the things we criticize, you and I criticize Brian Kelly over the last couple of years, we've been vindicated to a degree. Now we're going to find out if we're going to be vindicated on our opinion of the talent level at Notre Dame, especially on offense.
Sure.
Because if we are correct and the talent is better than people realize, then this thing is going to get turned around real fast on offense. And we started to see it a little bit this year.
Yep.
And that to me is going to be a thing of, and if they're not able to get this going, either A, Tommy Rees isn't who we think he is, and I do think he is, or B, the talent level isn't what we thought it was. And that's what we're going to find out. We're going to find out if Tyler Buckner's and Drew Piner as good as we think they are, if the running backs are as good as we think they are, if the O-line talent is as good as we think it is, and if the receiver talent's as good as we think it is. The one area where no one questions is tight end. I mean, that nobody questions that.
Right. No.
But I do think it's fair to question, for people to question us on, is the talent really as good as you say it is? Because look at the results. And that's fair. That's very fair. And I'm not going to tell people they're necessarily wrong. It's just, we're going to find out now. We're going to find out now if the talent is in fact where it needs to be. And what I would do is, I would hire Jamarcus Shepard if you can, and we believe Notre Dame will.
Right.
I would do that, and I would sit down and have a heart-to-heart with Xavier Watts and say, look, man, we want you back. And we're going to bring you back, and you're going to play. You're going to get the ball, right? Because you've got to make – it's not about competing. You got to make that kid some promises.
Yeah.
Because he knows he's going to play at safety.
He's been made promises before by a previous coach,
right,
and they weren't followed through on, and that's why he moved to defense.
Right.
I mean, let's be honest about that. So you're dealing with some trust issues.
Yeah. And to me, the reason I say to move him is because, number one, I think receiver still his best position. I think the depth at safety now is okay without him now that you've got Brandon Joseph and Ramon Henderson, and you're bringing back DJ Brown and Houston Griffith. And to me, I think a combination of Ramon and Brandon Joseph as your starters has a chance to be really good. And yes, Xavier would make it even better. Xavier's going to make wherever he plays better.
Yes,
right.
Absolutely.
I mean, that's just a fact.
You said it the other day that if Xavier Watts is playing defense, it's going to kind of be a 3-man.
Oh yeah,
kind of a rotation, similar to what they did when Kyle Hamilton was a freshman.
Correct.
It'd be similar to that, right?
Correct.
And you're going to be very good there. There's no question about it. But if he goes over to offense, he's also going to be in the rotation, and he makes that group that much deeper and that much better because he is going to play. I'm not saying he's going to be a starter, but he could be depending on what formation they come out in. They, depending on how things go. Somebody in the chat asked what position offensively that he plays. Do you want to cover that real quick
Xavier?
so people understand? Yeah.
He's played all over. He's played slot, X, and W.
Right, exactly.
And I think that's part of the value that he brings to the table. He can play slot. I think that a 4-man kind of rotation of Xavier, Styles, Lindsey, and Avery Davis is going to be big because I don't think Avery Davis and Lindsey are guys that are going to be able to play 50-plus snaps a game. Even if Avery Davis comes back, he's going to be coming off a torn ACL. I don't know if you're going to want to play him 50, 60 snaps a game again. And I think Xavier can do some things where you can kind of go fast, go with your faster group, your lightning group. That's what we would call it. Is we had when I was at different places where I was the pass game coordinator, we had what we called our lightning group. And it was, we'd put some faster guys in the field.
Yeah.
And even some guys were out of position a little bit. But that's something I think they can do with Xavier. But he brings a after the catch dynamic they don't have a lot of. Because Braden Lindsey can do things after the catch with pure speed, but Braden Lindsey's never been a guy that's like juking people, and I don't care. You don't need to ask him to do that. Xavier can do that. I think Lorenzo Styles can do that to a degree, but Xavier brings it more than anybody else would have it, and I think you need that element, in my opinion. And that's I think Xavier could still be a really good player. And then you're going to lose Lindsey and Avery Davis after next year, and Avery and Xavier would step into an even bigger role at that point in time.
Correct.
And so I think you move Xavier Watts back, and you've got Tobias coming up, Dion, Lorenzo Styles, Avery Davis, Braden Lindsey. You got a chance to have and Jaden Thomas is a guy that had a really strong finish to the year in practice. All of a sudden, you're looking at a really good receiver situation. You got a veteran like Joe Wilkins who's a solid player, provides leadership, character, all that kind of stuff. If Jamarcus Shepard's the coach we think he is, and if he's the guy, and again, I expect him to be, then I think this group can get going pretty quickly.
It alleviates some of my fears at wide receiver, just from a depth standpoint, from a production standpoint, from a leadership standpoint, all of those different things. It alleviates a lot of that if Xavier Watts, heads over to offense.
And really land at least one high school, because I think they're going to get at least one high school kid in February.
Okay.
But if you get a high school kid and then you get Xavier Watts over there, and all of a sudden the depth issues aren't a problem anymore.
Right.
And you've still got Matt Salerno, I believe, has another year of eligibility left as well. So all of a sudden now you're fine there. You're fine. And you're only going to lose, 2-3 guys after the season. And now you start replacing them with
now
the next
get
group of
role
recruits.
with the reload situation. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Well, Brian, let's get to a couple super chats here before I have to bail, because I think there are some good ones in here.
Yeah,
if I'm not
Cuba
mistaken.
Puig. Here we go. Let's do this one.
Okay, sounds good. Thank you, Cuba, for the super chat. Do you think Tyler Buckner can and will play at a higher level than Stetson Bennett yesterday? What is his ceiling? Well, the first part is yes. I think he can play at a higher level than Stetson Bennett.
Well, he's certainly more physically talented than Stetson Bennett. I mean, look, Stetson Bennett didn't win the national title. Like, they didn't win in spite of Stetson Bennett last night. He made some big-time throws.
Oh, yeah.
But he won because of this and this.
On the money, yeah.
Yeah, and that post route that was just long enough where the guy had to kind of lay out for it. I mean, you can't be perfect every time.
Great.
But to me, Tyler Buckner has dynamic game-changing ability. He's got to improve, and we'll have a show about Tyler and the quarterback position. We'll have a couple shows in the coming up here very soon as we kind of go position by position and do like a preview of the off season and things like that.
Yep.
But yeah, Cuba, I think I mean, I think he's got game changer ability. I do. I think he's a guy. See, like Stetson Bennett was a game manager that you just need him to make a couple big plays. That's what Ian Book always. If Ian Book would have been more willing to take some more chances down the field, that's what Ian Book would have been, but better because he's got better physical tools than Stetson Bennett, in my opinion. But Tyler Buchner, to me, is, I mean, just a raw talent standpoint, he's closer to Kyler Murray than he is Stetson Bennett from just a God-given tool standpoint. Sure. Now, can he go play? I don't have an answer to that because I haven't seen him play. But talent-wise, Tyler Buchner has elite tools. I gave him a 5-star upside grade, and he was a 5-star recruit on my board until his senior year got canceled
because he didn't have one.
Because he just didn't have the experience. His experience, you know, the intangible grade brought him down under 5-star because of his injury and the lack of experience. But 5-star talent for sure, in my opinion. Absolutely.
Okay. Next one is from Patrick Fitzgerald. Thank you, Patrick. Any reason why Pine always seems to be looked down upon? He seems to have a swagger about him and look good in limited time versus Wisconsin.
I don't know who looks down on him, but we don't. I mean, I've written before, you can win with Drew Pine. The reason that we assume he's not going to start is simply because we believe Tyler Buchner is a 5-star talent. Right. But as we said earlier in the show, Patrick, because this is a fair question, is if Tyler gets hurt or doesn't pan out or Drew just flat beats him out, my opinion of next season doesn't change. If Drew Pine goes out and wins the starting quarterback job, my opinion doesn't change. I think both of these kids are great players. I just think Tyler has more game changer ability, where Drew is that game manager that will go make you some plays, a lot like Stetson Bennett. Drew Pine and Stetson Bennett compared, not Tyler Buchner. Tyler Buchner and Stetson Bennett have completely different skill sets.
Yes.
Stetson Bennett and Drew Pine are a lot more similar in skill set and style of play, in my opinion.
Yes, I completely agree with that. Completely. Kelly Garvey with the next super chat. Thanks, Kelly. The difference between Notre Dame and the two teams last night was line physicality, decisiveness, and decision-making on the defense and offense, not just athleticism. Offensively, I would agree with that wholeheartedly. I mean,
yeah.
The Notre Dame offensive line did not bring.
There's a lot of comments about Notre Dame not having the defensive lineman, and I have no clue where that comes from.
Yeah, I don't.
I don't know what it is, but like Notre Dame had one of the 5 best defensive lines in college football this year, and I don't understand why people don't recognize that. Because it's a little strange. And also, first of all, a lot of Florida's defensive linemen don't run. Jordan Davis does not run a 4.5. Wyatt does not run a. People are like, oh, they have these players who run a 4.5. No, they don't. Jordan Davis does not run a 4.5. But anyway, yeah, I go ahead, Vince. I don't know where.
In my opinion, I think a lot of it has to do with the visual aspect of what they were seeing last. So
they're big.
Number 99 for George is a big, massive human being, and Notre Dame's 2 inside guys, Jason Adamiola and Kurt Heinisch, they get lost in that guy's shadow. That doesn't mean that he's that much better. That just means he's a lot bigger, right? I mean, we're talking about production versus size, in my opinion. Now, I could be wrong on that.
Well, Jordan Davis finished the year with 5.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks in 15 games. He had fewer tackles for loss, fewer sacks than Jason Adamiola. I believe he had fewer of those numbers, too, than Kurt Heinisch. Yeah, Kurt Heinisch in 11 games had more tackles, 5.5 tackles for loss and 2 sacks, right? Now, Jordan Davis is this big mountain of a man, and that's not the defense Notre Dame runs.
Exactly.
They don't run a 2-gap defense. They're a 1-gap penetrating defense. So I'm not saying Kurt Heinisch is as good as Jordan Davis. What I am saying, however, is for some reason, Notre Dame fans do not, and some don't quite appreciate just how good Notre Dame's defensive line has been, in my opinion. Now, as we'll talk more about this tomorrow, but linebacker play was not where it needed to be this year on a championship stage.
Agreed.
It wasn't.
And we'll talk
and
about that tomorrow.
Diminishes the defensive line a little bit, and we'll talk more about that tomorrow. But physicality on offense, and one of the things I will say is physicality overall, that is one criticism you and I had of this football team this year for Notre Dame. They weren't a real physical team. We started to see a little more of that later, but I want to see Notre Dame get back to really being like a pad-popping team.
Yes.
You can be fast.
We saw that last night.
And that's what I think we learned from the SEC teams. You can be fast and physical.
Yes. I agree with
And
that.
I think that Notre Dame has a lot better speed than people realize. It's just there's a couple spots where they're not there yet. But, like, I'll take Notre Dame's receiver speed this year and stack it up against just about anybody. Overall team speed. I'll take Notre Dame's running back. I mean, Notre Dame has there's nobody on Georgia or Alabama's running back depth chart that's faster than Chris Tyree. It just isn't.
Mm-hmm.
And but it's how are they utilizing those players. So I think speed is fine. I don't think Notre Dame lacks speed against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State was a more physical team than Notre Dame was.
Yeah.
And that is something that I think is a very fair criticism that I want to see Marcus Freeman get back to us. I want to have in Cincinnati, it was a physical team under him, and I think they can get back to that, in my opinion.
Matt Carter. Oh, you were pulling it up. Matt Carter, thank you very much, Matt. He says, have you guys thought about revisiting the bold prediction shows and discussing the results of the season compared to them? I think that's actually a really good idea.
I hadn't thought about it. Vince, if you want to go ahead and write that down.
Yeah, I think that would be fun. Bold predictions show. I think that would be a lot of fun, to be honest with you, because I don't even remember some of the stuff I said. So I think it'd be a fun little trip.
And again, they're bold predictions, so they're not meant to be like, whoa, they all came true. Like I'll put it like, if all of our bold predictions came true, that means we weren't very bold with our predictions.
That's fair. Yeah,
that's the whole point. That's the whole point of it.
John A1, our buddy John, thank you very much, John. If Watts returns to wide receiver, how does he complement Styles, who would fit best together?
That's a good question. I think, to me, Styles can do things after the catch, but Styles, as we saw in the bowl game, is more of a vertical guy. He's fast. Use your speed to, he is what Braden Lindsey was, but he's a more natural receiver. He's fast. He can stretch the field. He can catch his crossing route and outrun you. To me, Xavier is and they're both strong. That's what I like about Xavier and Lorenzo is they're both strong. They're not big, but they're strong. Lorenzo is strong for his size. But Xavier, to me, can be more of a throw him a screen and he can make people miss. Get him a jet sweep. Lorenzo on a jet sweep is just outrun people. Xavier can make dudes miss. He brings some of that shake and wiggle that I don't think they have. And that's what I like, John, about those two together. It's a very good question.
Alex Udell said, thank you very much, Alex. College football championship game should be on a Saturday. Your thoughts?
100% agree.
Absolutely.
100% agree.
I am dragging you-know-what right now because I was up so late last night.
But Monday's not a college football day.
No, it's not.
Saturday is a college football day. The championship game, 100%, should be on a Saturday.
I don't
100%. Get it. And I understand that you don't have the semifinals on a Saturday because it depends on New Year's Eve. And I get all that, but the championship game should be on a Saturday. In my opinion. 100%.
Absolutely. Kelly he sent us another super chat. Thanks, Kelly. Says not enough characters to put O-line play. Ha ha ha. When I said line, I meant O-line.
Come on, Kelly. Rule number 76, no excuses, play like a champion, okay? And I know that sounds hypocritical for me since I didn't show up yesterday. I didn't answer the bell because of my voice. But, no, I think, Kelly, focusing just on the offense, I think it's 100% true.
Yeah,
but I do think the defense needs to be more physical, too. That's what I loved about that 2018 Notre Dame team. That was a physical defense. And I think and it was a fast defense. I think Notre Dame has more speed now as a team than they've had in a long time, outside of maybe the 2015 team. But the depth of speed is as good as it's been in a long time. They just weren't as physical as they needed to be this year, in my opinion, especially along the offensive line. But I think, Kelly, you and I would agree, we don't know if Harry Heason is going to build a great offensive line. We got to see it. I think he will, but they're definitely going to be physical.
Yes.
That's not going to be a question mark.
But Notre Dame has missed that for the last few years, and I'll take physical. I will take physical, Brian. So that is our final super chat, and we are up against the clock, at least for me.
Real quick, Vince, you got to before you bail. I'll do. You don't need to do an outro. Just answer this question, and then we'll be out of here.
Oh man. Okay. So for me, it's going to go. We're talking at Notre Dame. We're talking at Notre Dame. We're not talking about the pros.
College. Yep. Okay? In college. Yep.
So I'm gonna go Michael Floyd.
Yep.
Jeff Samardzija.
Ooh.
Golden Tate. Will Fuller. Chase Claypool.
I'm going Floyd, Tate, Fuller, Samardzija, Stovall, Claypool.
Oh, you.
I added in there because you can't not have Mo Stovall on there. That's just
agreed. But
Joe, that's a great question. But it also shows that Notre Dame's had some pretty good receivers the last 10 to 15 years. They got to get back to that. And if you get the right coach there, they're going to get back to that.
Yes,
so that is going to
no
do
question.
it, everybody. Great show. We're going to be back tomorrow to talk about the defense.
Yeah.
We're also going to have a PM show one of these nights because we owe Frank G and some of the other people that have been asking about a Peyton Bowen eval.
Okay.
We're going to get to that. It's just circumstances kind of keep happening to push these things off. So we're going to have a PM show one of these days coming up where we will do a recruiting show and get to that. But tomorrow we're going to focus on the defense, and then we're going to really dive into some off-season stuff here after that. So thanks, everybody, for joining us. Hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, hit the notification bell, give us a 5-star review if you're listening via podcast. And, of course, make sure you sign up for the message board because we have some great conversation going on there. And that's also a way that you can support us without us having to give a big chunk to you-know-who. So thanks, everybody. Have a great rest of your day, and we will talk to you again very soon. Thanks for joining the Irish Breakdown Podcast.